Jessica, the daughter-in-law, clutched the eviction notice like it might catch fire. Eric, her husband, Evelyn's only son, stood frozen behind her, lips parted but silent. "You can't sell the house out from under us," Jessica cried. Evelyn, once banished to the guest house behind her own home, didn't blink. "I didn't sell your house," she said calmly. "I sold mine." And in that moment, mother, widow, and forgotten landlord took back everything without ever raising her voice. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. He said, "Mom, please knock before coming in." Like I didn't raise him inside these walls. The words landed with more weight than the morning sun pouring in through the kitchen window. "Mom, please knock next time. It's better that way." Evelyn paused mid-step, one hand still on the pantry door she'd instinctively opened, as she'd done for years. Her fingers hovered over the familiar brass handle, cool to the touch, the same one she'd wiped down countless times when Eric was little and left peanut butter on everything. She blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right, but Eric didn't even look at her when he said it. He was busy rinsing blueberries for the brunch spread. Jessica stood nearby, humming softly, arranging plates that matched the eucalyptus-themed napkins she insisted were holiday neutral. "It's just a boundary thing," Jessica added breezily. "The guest house is so cozy for you anyway." The guest house? Evelyn smiled, but her eyes stayed distant. She looked at the kitchen tile, white marble chosen 20 years ago when the house was still theirs, not divided into hers and theirs. At brunch, Jessica raised her mimosa. "This is my mother-in-law, Evelyn. She lives in our back unit, for independence." Polite laughs followed. "Like a built-in grandma suite," someone said. "Exactly," Jessica beamed. "Evelyn just cut her quiche." The sun was warm, but her chest felt cold, like a door had closed without her consent. That night, alone in the kitchenette, Evelyn rinsed her teacup. Her hands trembled, not from age, but memory. She opened the fireproof lockbox tucked beneath the microwave. Inside, files. One envelope stood out, property deed, 2003 Wisteria Lane. Her name alone was on it, no co-signer. Mark had insisted, "You've got to hold the title." She had thought him paranoid. Now she understood. Evelyn watched the main house darken room by room. Through the window, Jessica laughed in candlelight, probably telling someone how cute it was that her mother-in-law had her own space. Evelyn laid the deed flat, her name, her paper, not a guest, not a tenant. Behind the kitchen, she whispered, "Let's see who really owns this story." Later, in the laundry area, she saw her towels, white plush labeled with a lone E, not Evelyn, just E, a placeholder. Next to them, Jay and Eric. Separate stacks, separate shelves. Jessica appeared. "Hope you don't mind. It's just more hygienic this way." "Hygienic?" Evelyn repeated quietly, but her voice had weight now. "Yeah," Jessica smiled, folding a dish towel as if it were a delicate sheet of origami. "And it just helps avoid mix-ups, makes everyone feel respected." "Respect." Evelyn nodded, though something inside her shifted like drywall cracking beneath paint. Later that day, Evelyn returned to her guest house to find a glossy brochure tucked under a grocery receipt on her counter. Pale lavender and soft teal font. Harmony Pines, a luxury assisted living experience. She picked it up carefully like it might burn. The paper was thick, the kind that screams expensive even before you read a word. There were sticky notes attached. One had a scribble in Jessica's unmistakable handwriting, "Just something I saw in the mail. No pressure." Another said, "Planning ahead is self-care." Evelyn stared at the pamphlet a long time, then at the trash can, then very calmly folded the paper, opened her silverware drawer, and placed it underneath the forks. That night, during a brief moment in the backyard when Eric stopped by to check in, he stood awkwardly near the garden hose, hands shoved in his sweatshirt pockets. "We should talk soon," he said. "About, future care stuff." Evelyn tilted her head. "Future care? Just in case, you're still sharp, obviously." He laughed nervously. "But it's good to be prepared. Like if you ever want to simplify things. Downsize. she repeated. I mean, it's just a big property for someone on their own. Evelyn's gaze drifted past him toward the two-story home with the fire pit she paid to have installed, where Jessica now hosted wine nights. You're right, she said softly. It is a lot to carry alone. Eric looked relieved. Exactly. Just something to think about. She smiled at him then, the kind of smile she hadn't used in years, the kind her husband once called her velvet knife. That evening, after Eric left, she sat at her small desk and opened her old laptop. The county assessor's office website loaded slowly. She typed in the parcel number from memory. Owner of record, Evelyn Marie Thompson. Liens. None. Assessed value up 117% from purchase date. She stared at the valuation. The market had exploded. Her house, was now worth more than double what she and Mark paid 20 years ago. Jessica wanted her to downsize, but maybe they were the ones taking up too much space. She clicked through to download the property summary. The PDF opened with a single page and her name in bold at the top. Evelyn Marie Thompson, sole title holder. Just 3 words below it, no secondary owners. She picked up the phone, the kind with the coiled cord she refused to replace. A familiar number rang. A man answered on the 3rd ring. Gleason and Wolf Law, he said. Evelyn's voice was steady. Hi, Martin, it's Evelyn Thompson. Hypothetically speaking, if I wanted to sell a house that someone else was living in, she smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached her eyes. How would that work? My grandmother's chair ended up in their sunroom. They didn't even ask. The light in the hallway was dim when Evelyn stepped into the main house that morning. She'd been invited, at least technically. Jessica had texted, if you're up early, we're reorganizing the sunroom. Would love your opinion. What she found wasn't a question, it was a statement. There, beside the bright paned windows and beneath one of Jessica's newly purchased succulents, sat her grandmother's antique rocking chair. Walnut frame, velvet cushion, the carved initials still faintly visible on the underside of the left. Armrest, EMR for Eleanora May Rosenthal. It had sat in Evelyn's guest house for the last decade, untouched except for dustings and memories. Now, it sat in the corner of a decorative Instagram-ready tableau. Throw pillows added to match the coastal modern aesthetic Jessica had been obsessed with lately. Oh, there you are. Jessica appeared from behind a folding screen, her phone still in hand. Isn't it stunning in here now? Evelyn didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the chair. I hope it's okay, Jessica continued. The chair just looked so nostalgic. It brings the whole room together, don't you think? Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it, smiled faintly. Of course, she said, if it fits your style. But inside, something cracked. Not shattered, just split. A small, clean fracture. That evening, Evelyn sat in the guest house and opened a photo album that still smelled faintly of cinnamon and old glue. Her fingers paused on a picture of her grandmother in that same chair, knitting a sweater for baby Eric. Her husband Mark's handwriting was scribbled in the margin. She rocked him to sleep every afternoon. Lucky boy. She swallowed the tightness in her throat. Lucky boy. It wasn't the first thing they'd taken without asking. Years ago, she'd sold her wedding bangles, genuine gold passed down from her own mother, to help Eric launch that landscaping business he promised would become the next eco-home wave. It barely lasted 18 months. She never asked for repayment, only respect. Now, her chair sat under a pothos vine and LED fairy lights, as if it had always belonged there. 3 nights later, Evelyn saw it by accident, a video on Jessica's TikTok. Bright music, fast cuts, captions like modern family home vibes and DIY sunroom makeover. The chair was featured in 3 different shots. One of Jessica's followers commented, "Where did you get that vintage chair?" "Obsessed," Jessica replied. "Family heirloom. It found its way to us." Evelyn read the words twice, then once more. Later that night, she called her old friend Martha, the only person who still called her E. "You saw it?" Evelyn asked, her voice low. "I did," Martha said bluntly. "You're not even in the story, Ev. It's like you're a ghost in your own house." Evelyn didn't respond. What are you going to do? Evelyn looked down at the file folder she had pulled from the lockbox earlier that evening, the one labeled Title, Deed, Mark's Notes. But beside it now sat a blank document she had just printed. It read, Formation of Limited Liability Company. Applicant, Evelyn Rosenthal. Her maiden name, the one she stopped using when she became just Eric's mom. She hung up the call and opened her laptop. Bank account, new trust account, LLC filing portal, all in progress. She opened the deed PDF, uploaded it, and began filling in the transfer details. Quietly, legally. Jessica had taken a chair. Evelyn was reclaiming the floor beneath it. An hour later, she received a confirmation email. Rosenthal Trust LLC has been successfully created. She sat back in her chair now back in the guest house, and whispered, Let's see how modern this family really is. They said the code got reset. I saw a lock where there used to be a welcome mat. The keypad blinked red. Evelyn stood outside the side door of the main house, balancing a small basket of clean laundry, dish towels she'd folded after noticing the ones in Jessica's kitchen were stained. A habit, something she'd always done without being asked. She entered the 4-digit code she'd known for years, red light. Tried again, red light. Once more, carefully, denied. The beep was sharper this time, final. She stared at the glowing screen, then knocked lightly at first, then louder. No answer. She shifted the basket on her hip, listening. Laughter floated from the back patio. Jessica's voice, bright and performative, echoed into the yard. Evelyn set the towels down on a patio chair and walked quietly back to the guest house. The silence trailing her felt heavier than usual. Later that evening, she asked Eric casually over the phone. Oh yeah, he said. We had to reset everything. Security update, new smart system. Jessica was getting alerts about weird logins. Evelyn kept her voice even. I see. But it's no big deal, he added. Just knock next time, okay? She smiled into the phone, though he couldn't see it. Of course, she said. It's your home. Then she hung up and looked at the framed deed still sitting beside her desk. Is it, though? That night, she retrieved the small audio recorder from the top drawer of her file cabinet. Mark had bought it back in the day to document client conversations. Just in case, he used to say. Truth fades faster than memory. She tested it. Battery full, audio clean. The next morning, she tucked it behind a bundle of rags on the laundry room shelf, next to the detergent they all shared, but never refilled. Then she waited. 3 days passed before the playback gave her what she needed. Jessica's voice filtered through the static, brisk and clipped. I just think she's, slipping. Another voice, possibly a friend or her sister, mumbled something unintelligible. No, seriously, Jessica continued. She's not all there. She walked in the other day like she forgot the code changed. I'm worried she'll wander off one day, and Eric's too soft to see it. Soft laughter followed, muffled. I mean, there's got to be a conversation at some point about options. Evelyn hit pause. She didn't cry. Not right away. She closed her eyes, leaned back in her chair, and listened to the faint hum of the fridge, the birds outside, her own breath steady and deep. Then she opened her eyes and whispered, Options. By the time the sun dipped behind the oak tree out front, she had her laptop open and the county tax records displayed. She clicked through the payment history every year, her name, her checks. Jessica and Eric hadn't contributed a dime. She still paid every cent of property tax on the parcel where both their dreams and their door locks stood. Noted. The next morning, Evelyn picked up the phone and dialed a number written on a card she kept taped behind her mirror. Thompson Realty, the voice said. This is Armin. I need a discreet agent, Evelyn said. A pause. Okay. What are you selling? My home, she said plainly. Great. What kind of timeline are you hoping for? No rush, but no sign, no flyers, no online blast. Another pause. Off market. Yes, understood. Do you want to meet to discuss listing details? Evelyn glanced toward the main house, where Jessica's laughter had once again begun to trickle through the glass. Not here. I'll come to you. That night, Evelyn folded the clean towels again, this time neatly placing them in a box marked donation. She slid the box under her bed. Outside, the keypad blinked silently in the dark, but inside her guest house, the wheels had already started turning, and no one had changed that code. They went away for a wine weekend. I opened their home to strangers with contracts. It was the scent that hit Evelyn first, lavender linen spray, a brand Jessica always overused, misting it across pillows and curtains before guests arrived. But this time, the scent belonged to her plan. The moment their SUV backed out of the driveway, bags packed, Bluetooth speaker bouncing with road trip tunes, Evelyn stepped out of the guest house and walked slowly, confidently, toward the main house. A folder was tucked under her arm, gloves in her pocket. The front door was unlocked. She still had the keys. Not that they remembered. Inside, sunlight filtered across the kitchen counters as if it were any normal Saturday. But this wasn't a normal day. This was the showing. 2 soft knocks came at the door, precisely at noon. Evelyn answered it with a calmness that surprised even her. "Hi," said a woman in a gray blazer and boots too expensive for a cold January day. "Armand's assistant, you must be Mrs. Rosenthal." Evelyn nodded, using her maiden name as planned. "Please come in." Behind the agent were 2 couples, mid-30s, clean shoes, quiet excitement. They looked around with practiced interest, eyes scanning square footage, window placement, tile condition. Evelyn moved through the house like a shadow, quietly packing away any object that could connect the home to Eric or Jessica. Family photos, monogrammed mugs, the obnoxious Live, Laugh, Love sign Jessica had nailed above the breakfast nook. She boxed it all in minutes and slid the container into the laundry room closet. Out of sight, out of story. One of the women from the couple paused at the staircase. "So, this is vacant?" Evelyn nodded, standing beside the fireplace like she'd never left. "It's under LLC ownership now. Occupancy ends soon. Turnkey ready." "Nice bones," the man added. "Kitchen's a little dated, but it has character," the assistant chimed in. "Property comes with clean title, no liens, and it's rare for something this central to stay off market this long." Evelyn stayed silent, watching, listening, and for the first time in years, she was the one being heard. At the end of the walkthrough, one couple lingered. The taller of the two extended a hand. "We'll offer 15 over asking," he said. "No contingencies. We can wire by Tuesday." Evelyn didn't flinch. "I'll have my lawyer review everything." She walked them to the door and shook their hands one by one, the way Mark used to after a solid business deal. Outside, a neighbor, Mrs. Connolly from across the street, stood with her arms crossed, garden shears in hand. She raised an eyebrow as the buyers drove away. "You selling?" she asked. "I thought your son owned this place." Evelyn smiled. The wind tugged gently at her collar. "Never gave it away," she said. That evening back in the guest house, she peeled off her gloves and placed the signed intent to purchase forms into her folder. Before she went to bed, she walked once more into the main house and stood in the master bedroom. She reached down and rolled up the cream rug Jessica had imported from Italy, gifted from her parents, as she often reminded guests. Evelyn wrapped it carefully in plastic and slid it under the guest house bed. No one would notice until it was too late. She turned off the lights, locked the door behind her, and stepped back into the dark, cold grass, feeling taller somehow. The next afternoon, Jessica returned from her trip, sunglasses still on, suitcase dragging behind her. She stepped into the bedroom and froze. "Eric," she called, "did you move something?" Eric was still outside, unloading wine from the trunk. Jessica's eyes scanned the room. A beat passed. "Where the hell is the rug?" Then louder, tighter, "Why does this feel empty?" They talked about remodels. I finalized escrow. The morning Eric showed Evelyn his Pinterest board of modern kitchen inspo, she nodded slowly and stirred her tea. "We were thinking subway tile with a waterfall island," he said, swiping through saved photos on his phone. "It'll really elevate the space, make it more marketable down the line." Jessica chimed in from across the room, holding her latte like a trophy. "We're investing in the future. It's about creating generational wealth, right?" Evelyn smiled into her cup. The steam warmed her face, but her hands stayed cold. Generational wealth, she repeated softly. If only they knew what she'd been finalizing that very morning. Back in her guest house, the printer hummed. 2 documents slid out, a signed sale agreement and a 30-day notice to vacate. Escrow would close in 21 days. Evelyn reviewed every clause. Martin, her lawyer, had moved fast, and she was fully within her rights. Eric and Jessica had no lease, no legal claim, but she still gave them formal notice. Then came the leverage. She opened a folder, lien documents, 2011. Flashback. Eric, desperate for a business loan, had promised to repay. Mark insisted on a lien. Eric signed without hesitation. I'd never screw you over. He may have forgotten. Jessica probably never knew, but the house remembered. Evelyn placed the notice, escrow proof, and lien copy into a folder labeled, "For your review, urgent." She walked it to the post office herself. Certified? The clerk asked. Evelyn nodded. And tracked. The next morning, she watched from her window as Jessica opened the mailbox, smoothie in hand. Her smile faded when she saw the envelope. Minutes later, the front door slammed. Jessica stood outside, shouting into her phone, face flushed, not from confusion but realization. You were never the owner, only the guest. That evening, Evelyn checked her email. Martin had forwarded the delivery confirmation with one line. They've officially been served. Clock starts now. She leaned back in her chair, sipping the last of her tea as the wind rattled the windows of the guest house. 30 days and counting. They asked, "Why now?" I said, "Because you already moved me out." Eric stood in the middle of the living room like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. His voice was half shout, half whisper. "You're actually kicking us out? You can't be serious." Evelyn stood across from him, her hands folded neatly in front of her. The sunlight from the bay window cut across the hardwood floor between them, bright, unforgiving, like truth often is. "I'm very serious," she said softly, "and I'm not kicking you out. I'm just reclaiming what was never yours." Jessica stormed in from the kitchen, waving the notice like it was a fire about to consume the drapes. "You can't do this. This house is our life, our memories. Eric grew up here, for God's sake." "I know," Evelyn said, her voice level. "I was there every minute of it." Eric's voice cracked. "You told me this was our future, that we could build a family here." "You built it on assumption," Evelyn replied, "not ownership." Jessica threw the folder down onto the coffee table with a loud slap. "This isn't legal. You think we'll just walk away? We'll fight this. We'll find a lawyer." Evelyn didn't flinch. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small notepad, and tore off a sheet. "A list of names I've already spoken to. Real estate, family law, and asset protection. If you'd like to add yours to the group chat, let me know." The room fell still. The only sound was the slow tick of the kitchen clock and the low buzz of Jessica's phone on the counter. Eric sank into the armchair, the same chair Evelyn once nursed him in when he had chicken pox. "I just don't understand," he whispered. Evelyn looked at her son, the man who once cried when his hamster died, who once begged her to stay up an extra hour so he could watch thunderstorms from the front porch. "I do," she said. "I understand perfectly." Then she turned and walked out. Back in her guest house, Evelyn locked the door and sat on the edge of her bed. Her hands trembled as she reached for the old box she hadn't opened in years. Tucked inside were cassette tapes from when Eric was little, old home videos, birthday cards, and a phone. Her old flip phone, long disconnected but still capable of playing voicemails. She powered it up. A few clicks, a chime. "Hey, Mom, it's me. Just wanted to say thank you again for helping with the down payment. I swear I'm going to pay you back. I owe you everything. Love you." The sound of his voice as a younger man, kinder, earnest, filled the small space like a ghost walking through a room. Evelyn closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek, not from regret, from release. Just as she began to drift into silence, her current phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Connolly across the street. "Someone dropped off a packet for you. Looked like legal stuff. I think Eric saw it before I could grab it for you." Evelyn's breath caught. Legal packet. She rose from the bed, grabbed her coat, and opened the door to a cold, wind-cut evening. The lights in the main house were off, but she could see a faint flicker through the blinds. Somewhere in there, Eric now held something he wasn't supposed to read, and the countdown clock was still ticking. Evelyn texted Connolly back, "Leave it by your porch. I'll be there in 10." Then she stepped into the dark, her footsteps steady on the gravel path, unaware whether what was waiting for her was defense or betrayal. For a second, I thought I'd lost everything. And maybe I had once. The envelope was half open, its corner curling like a leaf, left too long in the sun. It sat atop the stack of Evelyn's mail, left carelessly on the edge of the guest house porch, delivered not by the postman, but by someone with hasty hands. Evelyn saw it the moment she returned from Mrs. Connolly's porch, still clutching the manila packet the neighbor had retrieved. But it wasn't the color or texture of the envelope that froze her. It was the logo stamped across the front. Oak Ridge Escrow and title, Confidential Disclosure. Her stomach dropped. She moved quickly, picking it up, scanning inside. The buyer's financial disclosure was there. Full offer amount, wire verification, identity details. And just beneath it, a post-it note with handwriting she recognized. "So you're just selling it to some stranger?" "That's what we were to you, Eric." The world around her dimmed. Wind rustled the hedges. A distant dog barked. And Evelyn, for the first time in this whole quiet war, felt panic rise up like bile. She walked inside, shut the door, locked it. Her hand hovered over the deed folder, half wondering if she should rip it all up, before it slipped completely out of her hands. But then a memory surfaced, clear and brutal. She was sitting in the garage 10 years earlier, weeping over an envelope from the bank. Eric's business had defaulted again. She and Mark had been on the verge of dipping into their retirement when he stopped her. "Kindness without boundaries," Mark had said, "becomes martyrdom, Evie. You can love someone and still say no." He'd kissed her forehead and slid the check back into the envelope. "Next time, protect the house first." Now, here she was doing exactly that. Evelyn picked up the phone with a shaking hand and called Armand, the real estate agent. "Please tell me we're still on track," she said, skipping all pleasantries. He paused. She could hear keyboard clicks in the background. "We're still good," he said, voice calm. The wire cleared, disclosures acknowledged. Buyer is still excited. Evelyn exhaled. But Armand added, "If anyone legally tied to the property files an emergency occupancy dispute before the move-out date, it could delay closing. Not cancel it, but stall it. And raise red flags." She went quiet. "They haven't filed anything, have they?" he asked. "No," she said. "Not yet." She hung up and sat down at her desk, the same place where she'd first opened the deed. The air in the room felt different now, thicker, like it was waiting for a decision. Eric had seen the truth now, and truth once exposed had teeth. She picked up a pen and wrote a single sentence in her planner. "If they try to stop it, let them. But I won't stall my own freedom anymore." She underlined it twice. That night, the light in the main house stayed on, long past midnight. Evelyn saw shadows moving through the living room, pacing. At one point, she thought she saw Eric looking out the window directly at her. But she didn't move. She just closed the blinds and bolted the door. The next morning, a voicemail waited from Armin. "Quick update. Buyer's still good, but just a heads up. The title company's watching occupancy timing closely now. No issues unless something gets contested before move-out day. We're in the final stretch. Just don't let anything stall the handoff." Evelyn looked out the window toward the main house. Final stretch. But the fight might not be over yet. They served guilt with wine. I brought documents. The table was set with intention. Burgundy napkins folded into delicate triangles, candles flickering low, and a bottle of red, decanted and breathing, like the room itself was trying to relax her before it cut her. Jessica greeted Evelyn at the doorway with a hug that felt more choreographed than sincere. "I'm glad you came," she said, brushing invisible lint off Evelyn's coat. "Let's just have a nice talk tonight." Evelyn stepped inside without smiling. Her eyes drifted around the dining room, the same one where Mark had once carved the Thanksgiving turkey, while Eric held the mashed potato bowl like it was gold. Now, the walls wore framed canvas quotes like, "Family is everything." The irony was so thick she could smell it over the rosemary chicken. Eric sat at the head of the table, shoulders tight beneath his dress shirt. Evelyn noted the unopened envelope resting at his elbow, her certified letter, still sealed, still unread. Jessica poured the wine, her tone airy. "I figured we could be civil, just clear the air. Nobody wants tension during the holidays." "No," Evelyn said, settling into her seat. "That would be inconvenient." Plates were served, toasts were made, then the real meal began. "So," Eric said, finally breaking the surface tension, "we just want to understand why now." Evelyn dabbed the corners of her mouth with a napkin. "Because you already moved me out." Jessica blinked. "What are you talking about?" "You've got your own space, your privacy." "You mean the structure behind the house I paid for?" Evelyn's voice was calm but unmovable. "The one you locked me out of after labeling my towels like I was a guest in my own name?" Eric leaned forward. "You never said you weren't okay with it. And you never asked." Jessica's voice took on its well-rehearsed empathy. "We just want what's best for everyone. If there's been a misunderstanding, we can fix it. But reversing the sale, that hurts all of us." Evelyn took a slow sip of water, then reached into her bag. She pulled out a folder, placed it gently on the table, like a final move in a long, quiet game of chess. "I thought this might help clarify things." She opened it. Inside, a yellowed but still pristine document, lien agreement signed 2011. Borrower Eric Thompson, secured against 427 Wisteria Lane. Amount $48,000. Eric's signature was clear, bold, youthful. Jessica leaned in, her face draining of color. "What is this?" "Your down payment," Evelyn said. "You never repaid it, but Mark filed a lien, just in case. I didn't even know he did until I found this a few months ago." Eric's mouth opened, closed. I didn't think that counted anymore." "It always counted," Evelyn replied. "You just never thought I'd enforce it." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It pulsed. Jessica stared at the papers, then back at Evelyn. "You're destroying your family," she spat, her voice rising with each syllable. Evelyn's hands were folded neatly in her lap. "No," she said. "I'm saving what's left of myself." Then she stood, tucked the folder back into her bag, and walked to the front door. She didn't look back. Behind her, she heard the unmistakable sound of paper hitting hardwood, the lien, thrown in a fit Jessica couldn't suppress. But Evelyn kept walking. Back in the guest house, she unlocked her drawer and gently placed the folder inside. Then she sat down, her fingers trembling, but not from guilt, from freedom. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Connolly. "You might want to check your porch. Someone dropped something off." Looked important. Evelyn rose, heart quickening, because she knew now each document was a door, and someone had just left another key. "They assumed I sold to investors. I sold to a woman who used to clean this block." Evelyn stood on the sidewalk, coat buttoned high against the wind, watching as the new homeowner stepped out of a silver sedan. The sun caught the woman's curls as she adjusted her sunglasses and stepped up to the front gate of what was now officially her home. She walked like she already belonged. Jessica stood on the porch, arms folded tight across her chest, mouth a flat line of disbelief. Eric hung back near the garage, pretending to scroll through his phone. "Hi," the woman said warmly, offering her hand first to Evelyn, then to no one else. "You must be Evelyn." Evelyn smiled. "I remember you." She did. 5 years ago, this woman had cleaned several houses on the block, hers included, back when Evelyn's knees could no longer keep up with scrubbing. Jessica had once hired her for a deep clean before a baby shower, then complained that she charged like she thought she was a designer. Never tipped her. "I'm glad you remembered," the woman said, keys now in hand. "Not many people do, especially not by name." Evelyn looked over her shoulder where Jessica was now approaching, heels sharp against concrete, voice even sharper. "Excuse me, I don't think this is the right house. There must be a mistake. We haven't even moved out yet." "There's no mistake," the buyer said calmly, pulling a folded document from her bag. "The title transfer, the closing confirmation, the LLC paperwork, All signed, all sealed. Jessica's fingers twitched. I'm not sure you understand. This is our home. No, Evelyn cut in, her voice calm but firm. It was never yours. You just lived here while someone else paid the taxes. Eric finally looked up, guilt and exhaustion hollowing out his features. He didn't speak. The buyer turned to him, offering a gentle nod. I used to sweep your front porch every Tuesday. You never noticed. Evelyn stepped beside her. She has more respect for homes than you ever did. The silence was longer this time. Jessica's jaw tensed. Eric turned away completely. Inside, the house had been cleared of their personal belongings, save for a few forgotten items. A cracked photo frame, a branded mug, an empty wine rack. The buyer, her name was Carla, walked the perimeter slowly, then paused in the living room, running her fingers along the windowsill Evelyn once painted herself. I used to dream of living on this block, Carla said quietly. Didn't think it would be here in this house. You earned it, Evelyn said. She meant it. Carla turned to her and handed her a small wicker basket. Inside were lemon muffins, a thank you card, and a pair of handcrafted keychains. This house will finally be loved, she said. Evelyn held the basket in both hands, stunned by the weight of kindness, something so rare in that house for so long. From behind them, a moving truck pulled up. Jessica gasped, loud and angry. They're early, this isn't over. Carla turned, smiled. Actually, it's just beginning. Evelyn stepped out of the doorway, letting the light in. The door closed softly behind them. They left me the guest house. I gave it to someone who needed shelter more. The walls had always been thin. But that morning, the silence inside the guest house was profound. No more arguments floating from the main house. No more coded, passive-aggressive remarks tossed across the lawn like dry leaves. No more waiting for permission to breathe inside the property her hands helped build. Now, Evelyn stood at the threshold of the guest house, not as a forgotten parent, but as a decision-maker. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and exhaled. The space was small, a chipped kitchenette, a faded love seat, a twin bed under a curtained window. But it was legally Evelyn's, and soon it wouldn't be. Martin had filed to subdivide the lot months ago. At the time, Evelyn hadn't thought much of it. Now, with the main house sold and the deal finalized, the guest house stood on its own title. She knew exactly what to do. Evelyn dialed the number from a church bulletin she'd kept for a year. Hi, my name is Evelyn Rosenthal. I have a guest house, fully equipped. I want to donate it. A stunned pause, then, Are you serious? Evelyn smiled. Dead serious. 3 days later, a blue van arrived. 2 women stepped out, one with a clipboard, the other holding a duffel bag. Mia, 22, no family, 2 months clean, too afraid to dream of a home. Evelyn greeted her simply. This isn't charity, she said. Just something that was never mine to hoard. Inside, Mia touched the bed, the towels, the tulip-shaped lamp. Then she cried, quiet, raw. No one's ever given me a key before, she whispered. Evelyn placed the brass key with a blue ribbon in her hand. No one should feel unwanted in their own home. That night, Evelyn sat outside with tea, watching Mia water a basil plant by the window, already making the space her own. The next morning, Evelyn opened her laptop and saw the headline, Retired Woman Donates Guest House to Shelter Network. A home should be shared, not weaponized. Her photo was beside it, hair tucked under a wool hat, eyes sharp, posture quiet, but proud. The article had already been shared dozens of times. In the comments, people tagged their mothers, their grandmothers. This is what power looks like. We need laws protecting people like her. She's my hero. Evelyn closed the laptop and looked out at the street, where the garden still needed trimming and the mailbox leaned slightly to one side. Not everything had to be perfect, just true. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We'd like to feature your story at the Housing Justice Summit next month. Your voice could change everything. Evelyn stared at the message, and for the first time in decades, she didn't feel small. She felt heard. They texted apologies. I mailed silence. The text came at 7:42 a.m., just as sunlight stretched across the kitchen floor of Evelyn's new condo, golden and clean. She hadn't changed the curtains yet. The boxes were still half unpacked, but peace, unlike furniture, didn't need assembly. She saw Eric's name light up her phone screen, the way it used to when he needed money or wanted to vent about work. Mom, we didn't know we made you feel like this. Please, can we talk? Evelyn stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then she hit lock. Not because she was angry, because it was too late. That same morning, her inbox exploded. A screenshot had gone viral on a local Facebook group, a public comment Jessica left on a housing forum. It was dripping with sarcasm and victimhood. So apparently kicking your own family out is now heroic? Cool. I guess guilt gets you likes these days. Within hours, the backlash began. People commented with facts, screenshots, links to the news story. Someone even dug up an old Yelp review from a cafe Jessica co-owned for a year, 1 star complaining about her entitled tone. Jessica tried to defend herself. Then she tried deleting the post, but the internet never forgets. Evelyn didn't respond. She didn't engage. Instead, she made tea, jasmine, and opened the safe that now sat under her new bed. Inside was a folder titled Estate Final Version. She pulled out her will, reviewed it line by line, and made 2 changes. Removed Eric Thompson from all future property or asset claims. Reassigned her life insurance beneficiary to the Haven Steps Housing Fund. She paused before sealing it, wondering if she felt lighter. She didn't, but she felt right. Later that day, while sorting through an old keepsake box, Evelyn found a folded sheet of construction paper crinkled at the edges. On it was a drawing, stick figures standing in front of a big yellow house with a blue sky and a crooked tree. At the bottom, written in a child's uneven scroll, I love you, Grandma. You make everything feel safe. Lily, her granddaughter, just 6 when she drew it. Evelyn traced her fingers over the crayon lines. That was the only piece of the past she couldn't bring herself to throw away. She slipped the drawing into a new frame, set it on the windowsill, let it catch the morning sun. The next evening, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Eric. It was a number from Haven Steps. A soft, hopeful voice came through the line. Hi, Ms. Rosenthal. We'd like to formally invite you to join our Housing Justice Advisory Board. We think your story could help us shape future community programs. Evelyn blinked at the window where dusk was beginning to fold into the city skyline. Let me think about it, she said. But thank you. She meant it. After she hung up, she looked down at the framed drawing on the windowsill, and then at the envelope sitting unopened on the counter, forwarded mail from the old address. It was another letter, this one handwritten. The return label said, Jessica Thompson. Evelyn slid it into a drawer unopened because not every ending needs to be answered. They called it a betrayal. I called it a contract from a decade ago. It arrived in a heavy cardboard mailer, the kind you'd expect to contain a diploma or a retirement plaque. Jessica hadn't been expecting the delivery that morning, and when the doorbell rang, she opened it without thought, barefoot and still holding a half-drunk protein shake. The delivery man handed it to her with a signature pad and a quick nod, offering nothing but a courteous, "Have a good one." The return label read, Wolf and Associates Legal Counsel. No note, no preview of what was inside. She took it to the kitchen island and opened the flap with a butter knife, moving cautiously, almost nervously, as if her hands knew before her mind did that whatever was inside this envelope wasn't meant to be casually received. Inside was a picture frame, thick mahogany, immaculately polished, professionally mounted, but it didn't hold a photograph or a certificate of congratulations. It was the lien, the original, signed and stamped. A decade old yet preserved like a weapon freshly sharpened. Jessica stared at it, her eyes scanning quickly over the bolded title, Lien Agreement, Asset Leverage and Equity Surrender, 2011, before landing on the signature at the bottom, Eric's. Right there in permanent ink, his name tied to Evelyn's in a binding contract that neither of them had spoken about in years. Her heart began to pound. Her mind flipped through 1,000 versions of what this meant, none of them good. A small folded note had been tucked inside the package behind the glass frame. She opened it, expecting paragraphs or a lecture or something emotionally manipulative. Instead, it was just one clean sentence. This isn't revenge, it's a receipt. E. Jessica dropped into the nearest chair, the frame still propped in front of her, as if Evelyn were standing there herself, presenting the truth like a mirror she could no longer avoid. By the time Eric returned from a quick run to the hardware store, the kitchen felt colder. Jessica didn't look up as he walked in, too focused on the document in front of her. "What's this?" she asked quietly, holding it up without breaking eye contact. Eric squinted at the paper, confused. "Wait, is that—" "You signed it in 2011, she said. "Apparently, when she helped you avoid foreclosure, you used this house as collateral, and she filed it. You never paid her back. Did you forget that part?" Eric blinked hard, clearly scrambling for the timeline. "That was supposed to be informal. She said she told me she didn't care about repayment." Jessica laughed just once, sharp and bitter. "You really thought that woman didn't keep records." Eric rubbed the back of his neck and sat down across from her. "It was a different time. We were desperate, and she said she didn't want it back. She didn't want money," Jessica snapped. "She wanted respect, which you handed over in a loan and never returned." They sat in silence for several long seconds. Finally, Eric spoke again. "Is this legal?" Jessica didn't answer right away. Instead, she picked up the frame again, staring at the small embossed seal in the bottom corner. The document had been reviewed, notarized, and filed at the county office over 10 years ago. There was nothing to challenge. "She framed it," she said finally, her voice quieter now. "Like a painting, like a trophy." Eric exhaled slowly, like a man finally realizing how far he'd fallen, behind a plan that had started long before he noticed. "She always plays the long game," he murmured. Jessica stood, walked to the other side of the kitchen, and pulled her phone from the counter. She stared at it for a long moment, then opened Instagram. She didn't think. She just typed, "You never really own anything. Just ask my mem—" It was childish, reactionary, and useless. But at least it was honest. Evelyn, meanwhile, was sitting in her reading chair by the window when Martin's email arrived. "Framed and delivered, you now officially own more than the memory. You own the moment." She closed her laptop with a soft click and stood to pour herself a cup of peppermint tea. The air was calm, the light slanting in just right. On the mantel, next to the photo of Mark in his old garden hat, sat the original copy of the lien, unframed, dog-eared, but no less powerful. Evelyn didn't need a courtroom to prove her worth. She just needed ink, patience, and time. Her phone buzzed again. It was Mia. "Ms. Evelyn, I just finished decorating. I named the second room after your husband. I hope that's okay." Evelyn smiled, eyes stinging gently. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she typed back. "It's more than okay. Thank you for remembering him." She placed her tea on the windowsill and looked out over the city. She hadn't lost anything. She'd simply taken back what was always hers. They chased square footage. I built peace by the square inch. The steam curled upward from Evelyn's teacup, rising in delicate swirls that shimmered in the golden light of late morning. She sat on the small front porch of her new condo, a modest corner unit in a quiet co-op just 3 stories above a community garden that bloomed with kale, rosemary, and lavender. Every inch of this space had been chosen with care, not for status, not for square footage, for peace. The chair beneath her creaked slightly as she shifted, wrapping her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The scent of tilled earth drifted up from below, warm and sweet, blending with the citrusy tang of her orange blossom tea. A faint breeze carried the soft laughter of 2 children chasing each other between garden beds. Evelyn closed her eyes and listened. No one called her a burden here. No one asked her to knock. This was hers. Inside, a corkboard hung just above the desk in her reading nook, filled with photos and notes from women she now mentored at the housing nonprofit. The board had grown fuller in the last few weeks. New faces, new stories, new voices, all layered into her life like brushstrokes in a shared painting. Each woman came from something bruising, a shelter, a silence, a mistake they thought they had no right to recover from. Evelyn didn't offer them salvation. She offered them space and perhaps the quiet dignity of being seen. Sometimes it's not about the house, she told them once during a round table. It's about who still gets to hold the keys after you've built the walls. They had nodded. They always did when she spoke like that. They were listening. That afternoon, after organizing a pantry run for one of the new residents, Evelyn settled into her sunroom and pulled out an old box. The corners were worn, the lid faded from years in storage, but the contents were intact. She unfolded a postcard from a trip to Santa Fe she and Mark had taken in '92. A snapshot of him, smiling in front of a red adobe wall, fell out, faded but vibrant enough to summon his voice in her mind. It was never just property, she could still hear him say, his voice warm and grounded. It was your boundary. I wanted you to always have a line they couldn't cross. She pressed the photo to her chest and closed her eyes. He'd known what she didn't back then, that one day, the people closest to her might redraw the lines, and that when they did, she'd need to know exactly where to place her own. Later, she stepped out again, cup in hand, just as the sky began to blush with dusk. Mia's message had arrived earlier, but she hadn't opened it yet, wanting the moment to be quiet when she finally did. Now, on the porch, with the city humming softly around her and the garden below casting long green shadows, she tapped the screen and read, I just gave birth. She's healthy. 7 LEBS 1 Oz. I named her Eve. For you. The world narrowed for a beat, not from pain, but from overwhelming softness. Like something inside her had been rewritten in ink that would never fade. Evening, not Evelyn. Evening, a beginning, not just an echo. She blinked back tears, let one fall, and smiled. Not for show, not for anyone else, just for herself. A soft knock pulled her from the moment. A courier, holding a clipboard and an envelope addressed in handwritten ink from the Housing Justice Alliance. Inside, an invitation. We'd like to feature you at our national summit. Your voice has become the reason women believe boundaries can be rebuilt. Say yes. Evelyn looked out at the garden again, then at the photo of Mark in her lap. Let's give them something to remember, she whispered. They gave me the guest house. I kept the land beneath their feet. The gate creaked as Evelyn pushed it open, the sound startling a small finch from the garden bed near the mailbox. The walkway was freshly paved now. Pale stone tiles replaced the old, cracked concrete path she remembered all too well. Rosemary hedges lined the edges, the scent warming in the sun. A new owner had clearly moved in, with care, love, and attention to every inch. She paused at the edge of the yard, letting the wind brush her cheeks. A child's laughter floated through the air, and a moment later, a red ball bounced softly into the grass near her feet. A woman followed it, mid-30s, curly hair, laughter in her eyes. She waved. You must be Evelyn, she said. We were told you might visit one day. Evelyn smiled, nodding, her fingers curled around the small wooden box she held. I just wanted to leave something behind. The woman, Carla's sister if she remembered correctly, stepped back, giving Evelyn space. The house had been painted a lighter color, the shutters now a cheerful shade of blue. Wind chimes dangled from the porch beam, where a security camera used to hang. Where once the front door closed like a gavel, now it swung open like an invitation. Evelyn stepped carefully up the steps, feeling the wood beneath her soles, steady and sanded. Her eyes passed over the place where Jessica used to leave potted succulents, not because she liked plants, but because they were trendy. Now, in their place, blooming jasmine spilled from terracotta pots, scenting the entrance with sweetness. She didn't knock. Instead, she sat gently on the porch swing, the box resting in her lap. The sunlight fell across her legs as she opened the lid and pulled out a single brass house key, the one she had carried on her chain for nearly 20 years. The metal was still warm from her pocket. She stared at it for a long time. This key had unlocked late-night arguments and holiday mornings. It had turned in the door the day she brought Eric home from the hospital. It had rested in her palm the day Mark died in the upstairs bedroom, his final words telling her never to give it away. Not completely. Now, it was just a shape, a memory in her hand. She placed it gently inside the box, beside a folded letter and a tiny ceramic angel that had once sat on the windowsill above the stove. She closed the lid, exhaled slowly, and stood. On her way down the steps, she stopped by the edge of the yard. She knelt, touched the soil that had once hosted her rose bushes. Now it held purple sage and wild mint. She smiled at the transformation. This wasn't her house anymore, and it didn't need to be. What mattered was that she had never let them erase her from its foundation. They had moved her outside, but they hadn't realized she still held the deed, still paid the taxes, still carried the leverage of a woman underestimated one too many times. Now she carried none of it, and yet somehow everything. As she turned to leave, Carla stepped out of the house with a baby on her hip. The little girl's curls bounced as she cooed and reached for Evelyn's scarf. "Her name is Eve," Carla said softly. "I thought you should know." Evelyn froze, her throat tightening. "I hope that's okay." She placed a hand over her chest. "It's perfect." She walked down the block slowly, the wind lifting the corners of her coat, her steps unhurried. With each pace, the weight of the years peeled away, layer after layer of silence, tolerance, and overlooked value falling behind her. By the time she reached the corner, the house was no longer visible, and for the first time in decades, she didn't feel outside anything. She had moved beyond it, voiceover, internal. You don't need to scream to reclaim your name. Sometimes you just need a pen and a quiet plan. They left me outside. I left them out of history.